Another street thug thinks he's Perry Mason. Judge Morrison looks down at the 18-year-old black defendant and laughs out loud. The packed courtroom watches as Marcus Williams stands in handcuffs, wearing a wrinkled public defender suit 2 sizes too big. The judge dismisses him with a theatrical wave, like swatting away a fly. "Son, save the act. This isn't a TV court." The white prosecutor smirks. Court officers shake their heads. Even the bailiff rolls his eyes as Marcus tries to speak. Judge Morrison cuts him off mid-sentence. "You're going to prison, boy. The only question is for how long." Marcus's mother sits frozen in the gallery, watching her Harvard-bound son being treated like garbage. Her hands tremble as she clutches his acceptance letter. The judge reaches for his gavel, ready to destroy this young man's future with a single bang. But what happens next will shock everyone in that courtroom. Have you ever been underestimated so badly that people forgot you might actually be dangerous? 4 months earlier, Marcus Williams stood on a completely different stage. As valedictorian of Benjamin Banneker High School, he delivered a graduation speech that brought 300 people to their feet. His voice carried the confidence of someone who had never tasted defeat. "We are not prisoners of our zip code," Marcus declared, gesturing toward the neighborhood visible through the auditorium windows. "We are architects of our destiny." The Harvard University acceptance letter sat framed on his bedroom wall like a trophy. Full academic scholarship, pre-law track, direct pipeline to Harvard Law School. His SAT score of 1580 put him in the top 1% nationally, but Marcus had earned something even rarer respect from teachers who had watched him transform from a quiet 7th grader into an intellectual force. While his classmates spent summer break at the beach or playing video games, Marcus punched a time clock at East Baltimore Public Library. 40 hours a week shelving books, teaching elderly patrons how to use computers, running reading programs for kids who reminded him of himself at 8 years old. Every dollar went straight into his college fund because even with a full ride, Harvard life demanded more than his family could provide. The library became his sanctuary. After closing time, when the last patron shuffled out and doors clicked shut, Marcus would claim his favorite spot in the law section. Constitutional law textbooks became his bedtime reading. Supreme Court cases replaced social media scrolling. He had already mapped his future: civil rights attorney, fighting for people who looked like him, who came from neighborhoods like this one. His mother, Patricia Williams, made this dream possible through sheer force of will. As a registered nurse at Johns Hopkins Hospital, she worked 3 12-hour shifts every week, plus weekend doubles when the unit needed coverage. She had raised Marcus alone since his father's death from a heart attack when the boy was 7, pouring every ounce of strength into ensuring her son escaped the gravitational pull of their circumstances. "Baby, you're going to be the first attorney in our family," she would tell him, usually while studying for her own nursing certification exams at the same kitchen table where Marcus completed homework assignments that would have challenged college students. East Baltimore wasn't the kind of neighborhood people usually escaped from successfully. Abandoned row houses sat like broken teeth along streets where corner stores operated behind bulletproof glass and ambulance sirens provided a constant soundtrack. But Patricia Williams had created something miraculous in their small apartment. A place where education was sacred, excuses were forbidden, and dreams were treated like blueprints for the future. Everything shattered on a humid Thursday evening in late August. Marcus finished his library shift at exactly 9 o'clock, same as every night. The 15-minute walk home took him through streets he had navigated safely for 18 years. He was thinking about a Supreme Court case he had been studying, Miranda versus Arizona, when blue lights suddenly painted the sidewalk behind him. Officer Michael Williams stepped out of the patrol car with his hand already resting on his radio. No relation to Marcus, just one of those cruel coincidences that life throws at you when you least expect it. "Hold up right there," the officer commanded, his voice carrying 30 years of assumed authority. "Good evening, officer," Marcus replied politely, exactly as his mother had drilled into him since childhood. Keep your hands visible. Speak respectfully. Don't give them any excuse to escalate. 3 blocks away, Danny's corner store had been robbed at gunpoint 20 minutes earlier. The perpetrator was described as a young black male, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing dark clothing and a baseball cap. Marcus Williams stood 5'8" in his bright yellow library volunteer shirt, carrying textbooks and his employee ID badge. But Officer Williams saw what he expected to see. "Turn around and put your hands on the car." "Sir, I think there might be some confusion." "Now!" Store owner Jimmy Davis appeared from around the corner, breathing heavily from running. He took one look at Marcus and pointed a shaking finger. "That's him! That's the one who robbed me!" Marcus felt his world tilt sideways. "Mr. Davis, you know me. I helped your daughter with her college applications last month at the library." But Davis's eyes held something Marcus had never seen before. Not confusion, but certainty. Deadly, absolute certainty. "I know exactly what I saw," Davis declared. "He fits the description perfectly." The handcuffs clicked shut around Marcus's wrists, cold metal against warm skin. As he was pushed into the back seat of the patrol car, Marcus could see his future dissolving like sugar in rain. Harvard University, law school, civil rights attorney, all of it disappearing behind a wall of flashing blue lights. The fluorescent lights in the courthouse meeting room flickered like a broken heartbeat, casting harsh shadows across the scratched metal table. Marcus sat across from his court-appointed attorney, David Carter, a man drowning in case files and caffeine addiction. Carter's tie hung loose around his neck, and his eyes held the glassy exhaustion of someone who had given up fighting the system years ago. "Marcus, listen to me carefully," Carter said, not bothering to look up from the thick folder in his hands. "Judge Morrison sent 3 kids to adult prison just last week. One of them was an honor roll, just like you. Doesn't matter." Marcus leaned forward, his voice steady despite the chaos spinning in his chest. "Mr. Carter, I have security footage from the library, time-stamped video showing me at the reference desk during the exact time of the robbery." Chen finally looked up, his expression mixing pity with impatience. "Kid, you think I haven't heard that before? Everyone's innocent. Everyone has an alibi. Everyone has evidence that will magically save them. But this is actual proof." "No." Carter slammed the folder shut, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. "This is an adult felony court. Armed robbery carries a 3 to 5 years mandatory minimum. Judge Morrison doesn't care about your high school grades or your college dreams. He cares about statistics and his re-election campaign." The public defender pulled out a standard plea agreement form, already partially filled out. 18 months in state prison, out of 12 with good behavior. Take it and thank me later. Marcus stared at the document that would brand him a convicted felon for the rest of his life. "You're asking me to confess to a crime I didn't commit. I'm asking you to be realistic about a system that chews up kids like you and spits them out." Carter's voice carried the weight of 1,000 lost cases. "I have 237 active files. I can spend 15 minutes on your case, or I can spend 3 hours and watch you get sentenced to 5 years anyway. Your choice." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. This wasn't justice. This was an assembly line processing human lives like factory widgets. "I need time to think." Chen was already packing up his briefcase. "You have until tomorrow morning. After that, the offer disappears and you're facing maximum penalties." The door slammed shut, leaving Marcus alone with the weight of an impossible decision. That evening, Marcus sat at his bedroom desk, staring at his laptop screen. The Harvard University admissions portal displayed a message that felt like a punch to the chest. "Due to pending felony charges, your admission to Harvard University has been withdrawn, effective immediately." 4 years of perfect grades, hundreds of hours of community service, SAT scores that had made guidance counselors weep with joy, all of it erased by a single email notification. His mother appeared in the doorway, her scrubs still wrinkled from a 12-hour shift saving lives at Johns Hopkins. She read the screen over his shoulder, and Marcus watched her face crumble in real time. "All those nights you studied while I worked doubles," Patricia whispered, her voice breaking. "All those mornings I left for work at 5 a.m. knowing you'd be at that kitchen table doing homework when I got home." She sat on his bed, suddenly looking older than her 42 years. "Baby, I already took out a second mortgage on the house, used your college fund to hire a better lawyer, but they want $15,000 we don't have." Marcus turned to face his mother, seeing the exhaustion etched in every line of her face. "Mama, what if I told you I could represent myself?" "Marcus, this isn't a debate club. This is the adult prison we're talking about." "I know." He gestured toward the law books scattered across his desk. "But what if the lawyer they give us doesn't believe in my innocence? What if the only person willing to fight for Marcus Williams is Marcus Williams?" Patricia Williams had raised her son to believe in education, hard work, and the fundamental fairness of American institutions. But sitting in her son's bedroom, watching 18 years of dreams dissolve, she felt that faith wavering for the first time. "The hospital administration called me into a meeting today," she said quietly. "They're concerned about negative publicity. A nurse whose son is facing felony charges doesn't reflect well on the institution's values." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. His case wasn't just destroying his own future, it was dismantling everything his mother had built. Down the hall, their neighbor Mrs. Washington turned up her television volume every time Patricia walked past. The whispers started immediately. "I always knew that boy was trouble. College education doesn't change what's in the blood." Patricia Williams put on airs, but look how her son turned out. The family's reputation, built over 18 years of perfect report cards and community involvement, crumbled in 72 hours. That night, Marcus sat alone in the public library after closing time. His supervisor had given him a key months ago, trusting him to lock up after studying sessions. Now, surrounded by legal databases and constitutional law textbooks, he began researching something he had never imagined needing: the right of criminal defendants to represent themselves. The Sixth Amendment to the Constitution guaranteed every defendant the right to counsel. But buried in Supreme Court precedent, Marcus discovered something else: the absolute right to reject that counsel and speak for yourself. Ferretta versus California, 1975. The Supreme Court ruled that defendants had a constitutional right to self-representation, even against the advice of judges and lawyers. Marcus pulled up the case file details on his laptop. Jimmy Davis had initially described the robber as 6 feet tall with a full beard and wearing a red baseball cap. Marcus stood 5'8", couldn't grow facial hair to save his life, and had never owned a red cap in his life. But Officer Williams's police report described the suspect differently. Approximately 5'8", clean-shaven, wearing dark clothing. The description had mysteriously transformed to match Marcus perfectly. He cross-referenced the police report timestamp with the library's security system. The robbery occurred at 9:47 p.m., according to Davis. But Marcus had been checking out books to patrons until 9:52 p.m., with electronic records to prove it. Someone had changed the timeline to make the accusation stick. Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the evidence scattered across the table. For the first time since his arrest, he felt something other than despair rising in his chest. If the system wouldn't fight for Marcus Williams, then Marcus Williams would have to fight for himself. He pulled out his phone and called his public defender. "Mr. Carter, this is Marcus Williams. I've made my decision about the plea agreement." "Smart kid. I'll file the paperwork first thing in the morning." "No, sir. You misunderstand. I'm rejecting the plea deal. And I'm firing you." The silence on the other end stretched for 10 seconds before Carter's voice returned, sharp with disbelief. "Kid, you're making the biggest mistake of your life." Marcus looked at his Harvard acceptance letter, now just an expensive piece of paper. Maybe. but it'll be my mistake to make. The courthouse conference room felt like a tomb at 8 in the morning. Marcus sat across from David Carter. The plea agreement spread between them like a poisonous offering. The document required his signature in 3 places, each one a nail in the coffin of his future. "Last chance, Marcus," Carter said, tapping his pen against the table. "Sign this, do 18 months, and you'll be out before your 21st birthday. Young enough to rebuild." Marcus stared at the paper that would legally declare him a violent criminal. The words blurred together. "The defendant hereby admits to the charge of armed robbery in the 2nd degree and waives all rights to appeal." I can't sign something that says I'm a criminal when I'm not. His voice was quiet but steady. Every time someone runs a background check for the rest of my life, they'll see convicted felon. Every job application, every apartment rental, every chance at a future. Chen leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus like he was examining a particularly stubborn stain. "Kid, you think you're the first smart teenager to walk through these doors? You think good grades make you special? Judge Morrison has sent honor students to prison before. He'll do it again." Marcus reached into his backpack and pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. "Mr. Carter, what if I told you I found evidence that proves my innocence?" "Then I'd tell you that innocent people go to prison every day because they thought evidence mattered more than politics." Carter's voice carried the weight of 1,000 lost cases. "This isn't about the truth. This is about statistics and conviction rates and keeping the community happy. But what if—" "No buts." Carter stood up, his patience finally exhausted. "I'm filing this plea agreement with or without your signature. Judge Morrison expects it on his desk in 1 hour." Marcus watched his court-appointed attorney pack up his briefcase with mechanical efficiency. This man was supposed to fight for him, to believe in him, to be his voice in a system that had already decided his guilt. "Mr. Carter, I'm exercising my constitutional right to represent myself." The lawyer froze mid-motion, his hand suspended over his briefcase. "What did you just say?" "Ferretta versus California, 1975. The Supreme Court ruled that criminal defendants have an absolute right to self-representation, even against judicial advice." Marcus's voice grew stronger with each word. "I'm invoking that right and formally dismissing you as my counsel." For the first time in their brief relationship, David Carter looked at Marcus Williams like he was seeing him clearly. "You have no idea what you're doing. This isn't a high school debate tournament. This is an adult felony court where real prosecutors destroy real lives for a living." "Then I guess I better learn fast." Chen shook his head slowly, like a man watching someone jump off a cliff. "Your funeral, kid. Literally." The door slammed behind him, leaving Marcus alone with the most important decision of his life. That night, Marcus transformed his bedroom into a makeshift law office. Constitutional law textbooks formed skyscrapers on his desk. Legal pads covered with handwritten notes papered the walls like battle plans. His laptop displayed multiple browser tabs, criminal procedure rules, evidence admissibility standards, cross-examination techniques, courtroom protocols. He had 72 hours to learn what lawyers spent 3 years studying. The East Baltimore Public Library became his second home, his sanctuary, his legal education in real time. After his regular shift ended, Marcus would claim a corner table in the law section and disappear into a world of case precedents and procedural requirements. He studied the way other people binged television shows obsessively, desperately, like his life depended on understanding every detail. Because it did. Marcus learned that criminal trials were theater performances with specific rules. Opening statements told the jury a story. Cross-examinations exposed lies and inconsistencies. Closing arguments tied evidence together into a narrative that demanded justice. But most importantly, he learned that the burden of proof rested entirely on the prosecution. They had to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. All he had to do was create doubt. And Marcus was discovering that doubt lived in the details. The police report claimed Officer Williams arrived at the scene within minutes of the 911 call, but dispatch logs showed a 45-minute gap between the emergency call and the officer's arrival. What had taken so long? The store owner's initial description didn't match Marcus at all. But somehow, the official police report perfectly described Marcus's height, build, and clothing. How had that transformation occurred? Most intriguingly, security footage from the library showed Marcus helping patrons until 9:52 p.m. The robbery allegedly occurred at 9:47 p.m. Unless Marcus had learned to be in two places simultaneously, someone was lying about the timeline. Marcus spread these discrepancies across his bedroom floor like puzzle pieces, searching for the pattern that would reveal the truth. And slowly, inevitably, that pattern began to emerge. 3 days before his trial, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his mother, reviewing his opening statement for the 10th time. Patricia Williams watched her son practice legal arguments with the same intensity he had once devoted to calculus homework. "Marcus, baby, are you sure about this?" Her voice carried a mother's fear wrapped in unconditional support. "It's not too late to call Mr. Carter back." Marcus looked up from his notes, his eyes clear and determined. "Mama, what did you teach me about standing up for myself? Stand up straight. Look them in the eye. Tell the truth." "That's exactly what I'm going to do." Patricia Williams had spent 18 years raising a son who refused to accept limitations imposed by others. She had watched him excel in advanced placement classes, earn perfect attendance awards, and win academic competitions against students from wealthier districts. Now she was about to watch him bet everything on his own intelligence and preparation. "Win or lose, I'm proud of the man you've become," she said, her voice thick with emotion. That evening, Marcus received a final call from the prosecutor's office. District Attorney Richardson himself was on the line, his voice smooth with practiced authority. "Mr. Williams, I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer. Plead guilty to simple theft, a misdemeanor, and walk away with time served plus community service. No prison, no felony record." Marcus felt the temptation like a physical weight. One word, yes. And this nightmare would end. He could reapply to colleges, rebuild his reputation, pretend none of this had ever happened. But pretending meant accepting that the system had treated him fairly. It meant agreeing that Jimmy Davis and Officer Williams had made an honest mistake. It meant abandoning every principle his mother had taught him about truth, justice, and standing up for what was right. "Mr. Richardson, I appreciate the offer, but I'll see you in court tomorrow morning." The prosecutor's laugh held no humor. "Son, I've been destroying defendants for 20 years. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Marcus looked at his Harvard acceptance letter, now framed on his desk next to his legal research. Two futures, one built on compromise, the other demanding courage. "Sir, I'm not trying to make it hard. I'm trying to make it right." Marcus sat on his bedroom floor at 2 in the morning, surrounded by documents that had become his obsession. Police reports, witness statements, store receipts, and library records formed a paper maze around him. His eyes burned from hours of cross-referencing timelines, but something kept nagging at him, a detail that didn't fit the narrative everyone wanted him to accept. He pulled up Officer Williams's incident report on his laptop and compared it side by side with Jimmy Davis's original 911 call transcript. The differences made his stomach clench with recognition. Davis had told the 911 operator, "Young black male, about 6 feet tall, heavy build, full beard, wearing a red baseball cap and dark jacket." But Officer Williams's official report described the suspect as approximately 5'8", thin build, clean-shaven, wearing dark clothing and no hat. Marcus stared at the screen, reading both descriptions over and over. The suspect had somehow shrunk 8 inches, lost 40 pounds, shaved his beard, and thrown away his red cap between the 911 call and the police report. Or the description had been changed to match the person they arrested. Marcus grabbed a yellow highlighter and began marking every discrepancy between Davis's initial account and the official police version. The differences weren't subtle mistakes. They were complete contradictions. Height, 6 feet versus 5'8". Build, heavy versus thin. Facial hair, full beard versus clean shaven. Headwear, red baseball cap versus no hat. But that wasn't the most damning discovery. Marcus pulled up the courthouse's online database and began searching for other cases involving Officer Williams and Jimmy Davis. What he found made his hands shake with excitement and rage. Over the past 3 years, Officer Williams had filed identical arrest reports in 15 different cases. Not similar reports, identical reports. The same suspect descriptions, the same witness statements, the same sequence of events, copied and pasted with only names and dates changed. Marcus cross-referenced these cases with Jimmy Davis's store records and insurance claims. Every single arrest had occurred within 2 blocks of Davis's store. Every single suspect had been a young black male between 16 and 20 years old. Every single victim had been college-bound with academic scholarships at risk. And every single case had resulted in plea bargains that avoided trial. But here was the smoking gun that made Marcus's heart race. Jimmy Davis had filed insurance claims for stolen merchandise in 12 of these 15 cases. Thousands of dollars in claims for items that were never actually reported missing in the police reports. Marcus opened his laptop's calculator and added up the insurance payouts. $47,000 over 3 years. Nearly $16,000 per year in fraudulent claims, all backed by police reports that appeared legitimate. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity. This was organized fraud. Marcus reached for his phone and dialed a number he had memorized but never expected to use. The call went straight to voicemail, as he knew it would at this hour. "This is Marcus Williams. I know it's late, but I found something. Something big. The police reports are fabricated. The insurance claims are fraudulent. This isn't about one robbery. It's about systematic targeting of young black men for financial gain. Call me back when you get this." He hung up and stared at the evidence spread across his bedroom floor. For 3 weeks, Marcus had believed he was fighting to prove his innocence in a single crime. Now he realized he was uncovering a conspiracy that had destroyed multiple lives over multiple years. The store owner and the police officer weren't just corrupt, they were predators who had turned the criminal justice system into their personal ATM machine. They targeted young black men with bright futures because those defendants were most likely to accept plea deals to protect their college opportunities. Marcus had been their latest victim, but he was also their first mistake. Because unlike the others, Marcus Williams wasn't going to quietly disappear into the system. He was going to expose the whole operation in open court. The morning air buzzed with electricity as Marcus walked up the courthouse steps, his father's old leather briefcase in one hand and a rolling cart of evidence files in the other. Word had spread through East Baltimore overnight. The valedictorian was representing himself in adult felony court. Local news vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward a sky that promised either vindication or destruction. Marcus wore his father's only suit, altered by his mother's careful hands to fit his smaller frame. The navy blue fabric carried the weight of memory and expectation, transforming an 18-year-old into something more formidable. Inside the courtroom, Judge Morrison looked up from his morning coffee with barely concealed amusement. "Mr. Williams, I trust you've reconsidered this foolish decision to represent yourself?" "Your Honor, I have not." Marcus's voice carried across the packed courtroom with surprising authority. "I'm fully prepared to proceed with my defense." The judge's eyebrows rose as he took in Marcus's professional appearance and organized materials. This wasn't the typical pro-se disaster he was accustomed to managing. "Very well. But I warn you, this court will not provide special accommodations for your inexperience." "I wouldn't expect any, Your Honor." District Attorney Richardson sat at the prosecution table, his confidence evident in every gesture. He had destroyed hundreds of defendants over 20 years, including several who had attempted self-representation. To him, Marcus Williams was just another amateur about to learn why people hired lawyers. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Marcus began, standing without notes, his voice steady and clear. "Over the next few days, you're going to witness either the wrongful conviction of an innocent man or the exposure of a criminal conspiracy that has operated in plain sight for years." The courtroom fell silent. Even Judge Morrison leaned forward slightly, his dismissive expression replaced by cautious attention. "The prosecution wants you to believe that I robbed Jimmy Davis's store on the evening of August 24th. They will present testimony from Mr. Davis identifying me as the perpetrator. They will show you police reports describing my alleged crimes. They will paint a picture of a young man who threw away his future for a few dollars from a cash register." Marcus paused, making eye contact with each juror. "But what they won't tell you is that I was 3 blocks away at the East Baltimore Public Library when this robbery occurred. They won't mention that the suspect description changed dramatically between the initial 911 call and the official police report. And they certainly won't explain why Mr. Davis has filed identical insurance claims in 12 similar cases over the past 3 years. Prosecutor Richardson shot to his feet. "Objection! The defendant is making arguments not in evidence." "Sustained," Judge Morrison ruled, but his tone lacked its earlier certainty. "Mr. Williams, save your arguments for closing. Stick to facts during opening statements." "Of course, Your Honor." Marcus's smile was respectful, but confident. "The facts will show that this case is not about robbery. It's about corruption, fraud, and the systematic targeting of young black men whose only crime was having a bright future." The jury was riveted. 3 women in the front row leaned forward, notebooks in hand. An elderly man in the back nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful rather than skeptical. Marcus returned to his table and called his first witness. "Your Honor, the defense calls Jimmy Davis to the stand." Richardson looked startled. Defense attorneys rarely called prosecution witnesses during their own case, but Marcus was following a strategy most lawyers would consider suicidal. Davis walked to the witness stand with the swagger of a man accustomed to being believed. He had testified in similar cases before, always with the same result: conviction, plea bargain, or dismissal in the defendant's favor when they accepted responsibility. "Mr. Davis," Marcus began, his voice conversational but precise, "you testified during the prosecution's case that you watched the robbery suspect for several minutes before he entered your store. Is that correct?" "That's right. I could see him pacing outside, looking nervous." "And during those several minutes of observation, you got a clear look at his physical appearance?" "Crystal clear. I've got 20/20 vision." Marcus walked to his evidence table and picked up the 911 transcript. "Mr. Davis, when you called 911 immediately after the robbery, you described the suspect as approximately 6 feet tall with a heavy build and full beard. Do you recall making that statement?" Davis shifted uncomfortably. It was dark outside, hard to judge exact height. "But you were certain enough to specify 6 feet tall to the emergency operator?" "I was estimating." Marcus pulled out a measuring tape from his briefcase, a theatrical touch he had practiced in his bedroom mirror. "Mr. Davis, would you mind standing up so the jury can see your height?" Richardson objected, but Judge Morrison allowed it. Davis stood reluctantly, clearly over 6 feet tall himself. "Mr. Davis, I'm 5'8" tall. As you can see, there's a significant difference between your height and mine. Are you telling this jury that in your crystal-clear observation, you confused someone my size with someone approximately your size?" Like I said, it was dark. "But the robbery occurred at 9:47 p.m. in August, when sunset isn't until after 8 p.m. The store has fluorescent lighting visible from the street. Are you now testifying that visibility was poor?" Davis was sweating now, his earlier confidence evaporating. "I saw what I saw." Marcus consulted his notes with practiced calm. "Mr. Davis, in your initial 911 call, you also described the suspect as having a full beard. I've been clean-shaven my entire life. How do you explain that discrepancy? People change their appearance, Maybe he shaved. Between robbing your store and being arrested 15 minutes later? The courtroom murmured. Even Richardson looked uncomfortable. Marcus pressed forward. You also told the 911 operator that the suspect wore a red baseball cap. I don't own a red baseball cap, and none was found during my arrest. Where did this cap disappear to? I don't know. Maybe he threw it away. Along with his beard? Judge Morrison gavelled for quiet as laughter rippled through the gallery. Marcus returned to his table, satisfied with the groundwork he had laid. Davis's credibility was cracking, and they hadn't even reached the evidence that would destroy it completely. No further questions at this time, Your Honor, but I reserve the right to recall this witness. Richardson stood for redirect examination, but the damage was visible in his posture. His star witness had been systematically dismantled by an 18-year-old with a borrowed suit and a briefcase full of homework. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked like a gunshot through the tense courtroom atmosphere. We'll take a 30-minute recess. The court is adjourned until 2 o'clock. The moment the judge disappeared through his chamber door, the courtroom exploded into urgent whispers. Marcus had just systematically destroyed Jimmy Davis's credibility in front of 12 jurors and a packed gallery. But everyone knew the real battle was still ahead. At the prosecution table, District Attorney Richardson huddled with his 2 assistants and Officer Williams, their voices low, but their body language screaming panic. Marcus caught fragments of their heated discussion as he organized his files. How does an 18-year-old kid know case law better than my staff? Richardson hissed, jabbing his finger at the legal brief Marcus had submitted that morning. Officer Williams loosened his tie, sweat visible on his forehead despite the air conditioning. He's got something. The way he was asking about timelines and insurance claims, he knows more than he's letting on. What exactly did you put in that police report, Williams? Just the standard description, same as always. Same as always? Richardson's voice rose before he caught himself and lowered it again. What the hell does that mean? Marcus pretended to study his notes while listening intently. The prosecution team was unraveling in real time, and they hadn't even seen his explosive evidence yet. In the courthouse hallway, Marcus's mother Patricia stood surrounded by neighbors and community members who had come to witness history. Mrs. Johnson from down the street gripped his arm with tears in her eyes. Baby, you made that man look like a fool in there. But are you sure you know what you're doing? Before Marcus could answer, District Attorney Richardson appeared at his shoulder like a predator stalking prey. The prosecutor's political smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Mr. Williams, might I have a word with you privately? Patricia Williams stepped protectively closer to her son. Anything you have to say to my boy, you can say in front of me. Richardson's smile never wavered, but his eyes grew cold. Mrs. Williams, I'm trying to help your son avoid a very serious mistake. Marcus nodded to his mother that it was okay, and they stepped into an empty conference room. Richardson closed the door with exaggerated care, the sound echoing ominously in the small space. Son, you've put on quite a show there. Very impressive for someone with no legal training. Richardson's tone was condescending, like a teacher praising a child's finger painting. But this isn't a high school debate tournament. This is an adult felony court where real careers get destroyed. Whose career are we talking about, Mr. Richardson? The prosecutor's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something dangerous underneath. You're playing in the major leagues now, kid. One wrong move, one procedural error, one piece of evidence ruled inadmissible, and I'll bury you so deep you'll never see sunlight again. Marcus met his stare without flinching. Is that a threat against a defendant representing himself? It's friendly advice from someone who's been doing this since before you were born. Richardson leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Take the plea deal. Walk away while you still can. Because if you push this any further, I guarantee you'll regret it. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, tapping the screen to stop a recording app. "Thank you for that friendly advice, Mr. Richardson. I'm sure the jury will find it very interesting." The prosecutor's face went white as he realized he'd been recorded threatening a defendant. "You little—" "Careful, sir. That recording is automatically backing up to cloud storage." Richardson straightened his tie with shaking hands, his political composure crumbling. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Actually, I think I do." Marcus pocketed his phone and headed for the door. "See you back in court." Alone in the conference room, Richardson pulled out his phone and dialed a number with urgent desperation. "We have a problem. The Williams kid isn't just some amateur playing lawyer. He's been investigating us. He knows about the insurance claims, the report discrepancies, maybe even the bank records." The voice on the other end was sharp with alarm. "How much does he know?" "I don't know, but he's been recording our conversations. This whole thing is about to blow up in our faces." "Then you better make sure it doesn't." Marcus returned to the courtroom with 5 minutes to spare, his confidence radiating like heat from a furnace. He had entered this building as a scared teenager facing prison time. Now he was something else entirely, a young man who had discovered his own power and wasn't afraid to use it. His mother squeezed his shoulder as he sat down. "How did it go?" Marcus smiled as Judge Morrison returned to his bench. "Let's just say the prosecution is about to get very uncomfortable." The judge raised his gavel, unaware that the next hour would change everything. Judge Morrison's gavel signaled the resumption of court, but the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The prosecution table buzzed with nervous energy, while Marcus sat with the calm confidence of someone holding a royal flush. "Your Honor, the defense recalls Officer Michael Williams to the stand." The officer approached the witness box with visible reluctance, his earlier swagger replaced by the careful movements of a man walking through a minefield. Marcus had been polite during the first round of questioning. Now the gloves were coming off. "Officer Williams, you testified that you arrived at the crime scene within minutes of the 911 call. Is that accurate?" "That's correct." Marcus walked to his evidence table and retrieved a thick folder. "I'd like to enter into evidence the official dispatch logs from the Baltimore Police Department for August 24th. Richardson shot up. "Objection! Foundation hasn't been established for these documents." "Your Honor, these are public records obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests. Officer Williams can authenticate them as part of the department's standard operating procedures." Judge Morrison examined the documents. "I'll allow it. Continue, Mr. Williams." Marcus approached the witness stand with the dispatch logs in hand. "Officer Williams, according to these official records, the 911 call reporting the robbery was logged at 9:47 p.m. Your arrival at the scene was logged at 10:32 p.m. That's a 45-minute response time, not within minutes as you testified. How do you explain this discrepancy?" Officer Williams shifted uncomfortably. "Dispatch logs aren't always accurate. Sometimes there are delays in updating the system." "A 45-minute delay in updating a system that tracks emergency response times?" "It happens." Marcus nodded thoughtfully and moved to his next exhibit. "Officer Williams, I'd like you to look at your official incident report from that evening. You described the suspect as approximately 5'8", thin build, clean-shaven. Do you see that description?" "Yes." "Now I'd like you to listen to the 911 call that initiated your response." Marcus pressed play on a digital recorder, and Jimmy Davis's voice filled the courtroom. 911, what's your emergency?" "I've been robbed. Young black male, about 6 feet tall, heavy build, full beard, wearing a red baseball cap." The courtroom fell dead silent as the recording played. The jury looked from the transcript to Officer Williams, whose face had gone ashen. "Officer Williams, can you explain how a suspect described as 6 feet tall, heavy build, and bearded transformed into someone 5'8", thin, and clean-shaven between the 911 call and your report?" Witness descriptions are often inaccurate under stress. But you didn't interview the witness to clarify these massive discrepancies, did you? I followed standard procedure. Marcus returned to his evidence table and picked up a manila folder that made Officer Williams visibly tense. Officer Williams, over the past 3 years, how many arrests have you made in connection with crimes reported by Jimmy Davis? Richardson stood quickly. Objection? Relevance? Your Honor, this goes to the pattern of conduct and credibility of the witness. I'll allow it, but make your point quickly, Mr. Williams. Marcus opened the folder with theatrical precision. 15 arrests, Officer Williams. 15 young black males, all between ages 16 and 20, all within 2 blocks of Mr. Davis's store. Is that correct? I patrol that area regularly. It's a high-crime neighborhood. And in how many of these 15 cases did you use identical language in your police reports? Officer Williams's jaw tightened. I don't understand the question. Marcus pulled out photocopies of multiple police reports and handed them to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll notice that the suspect descriptions, witness statements, and sequence of events are virtually identical across 12 different cases spanning 3 years. Copy and paste police work. The jury members compared the reports, their expressions shifting from curiosity to alarm as they recognized the pattern. Officer Williams, did you actually investigate these crimes, or did you simply fill out template reports with different names and dates? I resent the implication. Then explain how 12 different suspects in 12 different robberies all happened to pace outside the store nervously, all approached from the east side of the street, all wore dark clothing, and all fled in the same direction. Officer Williams was sweating now, his uniform collar damp with perspiration. Criminals tend to follow patterns. Marcus moved in for the killing blow. Officer Williams, are you aware that Mr. Davis has filed insurance claims totaling $47,000 for merchandise allegedly stolen in these 15 cases? I don't handle insurance matters. Are you aware that your police reports provided the documentation necessary for Mr. Davis to collect on those claims? That's not my responsibility. Marcus walked to his briefcase and pulled out a final set of documents that made Officer Williams grip the witness stand arms. Officer Williams, I'd like to enter into evidence bank records showing monthly payments of $500 from Jimmy Davis to your personal checking account over the past 3 years. Payments labeled as security consulting. Can you tell the jury what security consulting services you provided for $18,000? The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison banged his gavel repeatedly as reporters scribbled frantically and spectators gasped in shock. Richardson was on his feet, objecting desperately, but the damage was done. Officer Williams sat frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I can't. Those payments were legitimate. For what services, Officer Williams? I provided security advice. What advice, specifically? The silence stretched for 30 seconds before Officer Williams finally spoke, his voice barely audible. I want to speak to my attorney. The courtroom buzzed with electric tension as Judge Morrison called for order, his gavel echoing like thunder through the packed chamber. Officer Williams sat slumped in the witness chair, his 20-year career dissolving in real time. At the prosecution table, District Attorney Richardson frantically shuffled papers, searching for salvation that didn't exist. Marcus stood at the defense table, no longer the scared teenager who had entered this courtroom days earlier. He had transformed into something the justice system rarely witnessed, a young man who had refused to accept the role others had written for him. Your Honor, Marcus began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned the right to speak. I move for immediate dismissal of all charges based on prosecutorial misconduct and fabricated evidence. Judge Morrison removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly, a gesture that had become his thinking ritual over 35 years on the bench. When he looked up, his expression held something none of the observers had seen before, genuine respect for the defendant standing before him. Mr. Williams, in 3.5 decades of presiding over criminal cases, I have witnessed many attorneys present their arguments, Some competent, some excellent, a few truly exceptional. He paused, letting his words settle over the silent courtroom. What you have accomplished over the past 4 days represents legal advocacy of the highest caliber. The judge stood, a formal gesture reserved for the most serious moments. You have not only proven your innocence beyond any doubt, but you have exposed a systematic corruption that has operated under this court's jurisdiction for years. You have conducted yourself with the skill, preparation, and ethical standards that would be admired in any member of the bar. Marcus felt his mother's hand squeeze his shoulder from the gallery behind him, her pride radiating like warmth against his back. All charges against Marcus Williams are hereby dismissed with prejudice. The record will reflect that this dismissal is based on prosecutorial misconduct, fabricated evidence, and a complete absence of credible testimony supporting the allegations. The courtroom erupted in applause, but Judge Morrison wasn't finished. Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate investigation into the conduct of Officer Michael Williams and the business practices of Jimmy Davis. Based on the evidence presented, I have probable cause to believe that multiple felonies have been committed under the guise of law enforcement. At that moment, courthouse security officers approached the prosecution table with handcuffs gleaming under the fluorescent lights. District Attorney Richardson looked up in shock as his world collapsed around him. Michael Williams, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false police reports, and violation of civil rights under color of authority. Officer Williams stood on unsteady legs, his hands shaking as the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. The same sound Marcus had heard during his own arrest, but now the roles had reversed completely. Jimmy Davis, you are under arrest for insurance fraud, conspiracy, and filing false reports. Davis emerged from the gallery where he had been watching his carefully constructed scheme unravel. His face was pale with the realization that his victims had found their voice, and that voice belonged to an 18-year-old who had refused to be silenced. As the two men were led away in handcuffs, Marcus turned to address the packed courtroom. Media cameras captured every word as he spoke with the composure of someone far older than his years. This victory doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to everyone who refuses to accept injustice as inevitable. It belongs to every person who has been underestimated, dismissed, or told they don't belong in places of power. His voice grew stronger, carrying to the back of the room where community members stood with tears in their eyes. For 3 years, Officer Williams and Jimmy Davis targeted young black men because they believed we would accept their version of who we were supposed to be. They counted on our fear, our inexperience, our willingness to disappear quietly into a system that had already judged us guilty. Marcus looked directly into the news cameras, knowing his words would reach far beyond this courtroom. But they made one critical mistake. They underestimated the power of preparation, the strength of truth, and the determination of someone who refuses to let others define his destiny. The applause was deafening now, echoing off the marble walls like thunder. Judge Morrison made no effort to quiet the celebration. This was a moment that demanded recognition. As Marcus gathered his files and prepared to leave the courthouse a free man, his phone buzzed with a text message that made him smile. Harvard University Office of Admissions. Mr. Williams, we need to discuss your immediate reinstatement and a full scholarship to our pre-law program. Congratulations on your remarkable legal victory. Marcus Williams walked out of that courthouse not as a defendant, but as a young man who had proven that intelligence, courage, and preparation could overcome any system designed to destroy him. The boy who had entered as a victim left as a victor. 1 year later, Marcus Williams walked across Harvard Yard in the crisp October air, his constitutional law textbook tucked under his arm like a badge of honor. The same hands that had once trembled while signing court documents now took confident notes in Professor Carter's advanced civil rights seminar. The case that had nearly destroyed his future was now taught as a precedent in law schools across the country. Williams versus State of Maryland had become required reading for criminal procedure courses, cited in legal journals as an example of how systematic corruption could be exposed through meticulous preparation and courage. Marcus's phone buzzed with a familiar number, the Baltimore Public Defender's Office. "Marcus, this is Janet Rodriguez. We have a case that sounds exactly like yours. 18-year-old honor student, false arrest, same pattern of corruption in a different district. Would you consider interning with our office this summer?" Marcus smiled as he looked up at the Harvard Law School building where he would spend the next 3 years. "Send me the case file. I'll review it tonight." The scared teenager who had once faced 5 years in prison was gone, replaced by a young man who understood his purpose with crystal clarity. Every case he would take, every client he would represent, every corrupt system he would challenge, all of it traced back to that moment when he had refused to accept the limitations others tried to place on him. That evening, Marcus sat in his dorm room video calling his mother, who beamed with pride from their kitchen table in East Baltimore. Behind her, the wall displayed 2 framed items, his Harvard acceptance letter and his court victory certificate, side by side like bookends of a dream realized. "Baby, that reporter from CNN wants to interview you again about the documentary they're making." "Tell them what I always tell them, Mama. This story isn't about me being special. It's about what happens when ordinary people refuse to accept extraordinary injustice." Marcus looked directly into his laptop camera, knowing that somewhere someone needed to hear these words. Have you ever been told you don't belong somewhere? Have you ever been underestimated so completely that people forgot you might actually be dangerous? Here's what I learned. Your circumstances don't write your story. Your response does. He leaned forward, his voice carrying the conviction of someone who had lived these truths. When the world tries to make you smaller, study harder. When they dismiss your voice, speak louder. When they underestimate your intelligence, prove them catastrophically wrong. Marcus smiled, thinking of all the young people who would watch this story and see possibility instead of limitation. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to remember their own power. Because the world needs more people who refuse to accept the roles others try to force them to play. He paused, his final words carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. Your potential isn't limited by their prejudices. Your destiny isn't determined by their expectations. And your future isn't defined by their definition of who you're supposed to be. The camera faded on Marcus Williams, no longer a defendant, but a young man who had turned his greatest challenge into his greatest victory.